I come now to the last chapter in the document of Laudato Si, and the title on the whole chapter, the final chapter, is Ecological Education and Spirituality. So we'll be looking at the education part, at what we hear today, and a little bit indeed the beginning of the spirituality part. And then hopefully next month or the next time we have it, we finish the document and maybe just recap, if there's a few minutes to spare, a general overview again of what has happened, of what we have heard in the document. I'm sure you'll be all glad, because it's been quite a harder document, I think, than, well, before we started it I thought it was going to be a lot easier to read and follow, but it's quite difficult actually. So in this part, Pope Francis asserts that we human beings lack an awareness of our common origin, of our mutual belonging, and of a future to be shared with everyone. So we must change, set out on the long path of renewal. So three things there he mentions that we don't seem to be aware of. I think he's talking about humanity in general here. We lack an awareness of our common origin, of our mutual belonging, and of a future to be shared with everyone. And he notes that those who wield economic and financial power, they have what they want. However, the vast majority, who are the rest of the people, they are practically enslaved, you might say, by the market forces. And the market promotes really extreme consumerism, always trying to get people to take more and buy more than they really need. The current global situation engenders a feeling of instability and uncertainty, and he uses a phrase of John Paul II, it becomes a seedbed for collective selfishness. That's what it leads to. Greed increases, and it leads then to social unrest, to violence, and mutual destruction. However, he does say we are capable of choosing again what is good, what is true, what is beautiful. We can respond to God's grace, which is at work deep within our hearts. A change in lifestyle could bring pressure to bear on those who wield political, economic, and social power, because when social pressure affects earnings, businesses clearly have to find ways to produce differently. So he seems very much supportive of the idea of putting pressure on the economic and political areas, because they look for profits, and if people decide, no, we're not going to correspond with you, then they have to do something different. He refers to the Earth Charter, which was passed apparently in The Hague in Holland in 2000. It stated, it's a kind of a plan, or a hope, I suppose, an expression of hope. It says, as never before in history, common destiny beckons us to seek a new beginning. Let ours be a time remembered for the awakening of a new reverence for life, the firm resolve to achieve sustainability, the quickening of the struggle for justice and peace, and the joyful celebration of life. A disinterested, the Pope says, a disinterested concern for others is needed, a rejection of every form of self-centeredness. And each of our actions, he says, and personal decisions can have an impact on the world around us, so it is important to overcome individualism, which is one of the big things at the moment in the world. Then he goes on, there's a need for education regarding the environment. We're faced with an educational challenge. Many want something different, but find it hard to change and to develop new habits. They want it, but they just haven't got the ability to, or the will, I suppose it is, to make those changes. Environmental education now includes as well not just scientific information, consciousness raising and prevention of environmental risks. It also deals with the mindset of judging things simply by their usefulness. Utilitarianism. Is something useful? Good. Then you go for it. And too often, however, the simple fact that it's useful is not the best way to go about things. It seeks to restore harmony within ourselves, with others, with nature, with other creatures, with God. That's what the education is aimed at, restoring that harmony. There's need for an adequate motivation, and there's need for personal transformation. So it applies personally to each one of us. And he quotes, or his words here actually are, only by cultivating sound virtues will people be able to make a selfless ecological commitment. So the need for that interior conversion. He points out that even the little daily actions are important. Avoiding unnecessary use of plastic or paper, reducing water consumption, separating rubbish, I presume he's referring there to recycling and so on. Don't cook beyond what can be eaten within the reasonable time that it can be eaten. Use public transport maybe instead of individual cars. Turn off unnecessary lights. Things like that, just they're only maybe little things in a way, but they can, if sufficient people are doing them, have a big impact. All this will bring out what is best in human beings, and these efforts benefit both society and the people. Ecological education can take place in different areas, in schools, for example, in families, through the media, in catechesis, and other areas. And he particularly stresses here the family and the importance of the family. It's there in the family, he says, that we are first taught to show love and respect for life, where we are taught respect for order and cleanliness and care for creatures, and where we learn to say thank you in genuine gratitude. That's all in the family. There too we learn, he says, to control aggressiveness and greed and to ask forgiveness. Not sure if that always happens in families, but it's the place where it mostly happens, I suppose. Political groups, other social groups, and the church are also entrusted with helping people to raise their awareness. In seminaries and houses of formation, religious communities that I think he's referring to, there he says there should be education in simplicity of life and in grateful appreciation of God's world, as well as a concern for the needs of the poor. If we learn to appreciate beauty, we'll have a better attitude towards the environment. He connects the two there, an appreciation of beauty and concern and a good attitude for the environment. There is need for a new way, and he stresses the new way of viewing human beings, our life, society, and our relationship with nature. Then he moves on to the area of spirituality. Christian spirituality has a precious contribution to make to the renewal of humanity. Benedict XVI, he quotes, "The external deserts in the world are growing because of the internal deserts, because these have become so vast." So he's talking about the internal desert in our heart. We're not rich enough, I suppose we're not sufficiently committed. There's not sufficient spiritual life within. I think that's probably what he's getting at. And because of that, the external deserts are growing. In other words, there's need for an interior impulse, a profound interior conversion. Some Christians, he notes, ridicule care for the environment. Others are passive and do nothing. But if we encounter Jesus Christ, this should appear in how we relate to the world around us. If we really are close to Christ, it should have some impact on how we relate to the world around us. We must be protective of God's handiwork. And here the Pope refers again to St. Francis of Assisi, whose example reminds us that a healthy relationship with creation is one dimension of an overall personal conversion. And this includes acknowledgement of errors and failures in the past and a real desire to change. But individual efforts are not sufficient in themselves. There's need also for a community or a communal conversion. The conversion entails gratitude for the world as God's loving gift and awareness that the world is a gift. It entails self-sacrifice. It entails good works in imitation of God's generosity. It entails an awareness of our commitment and our connection with the rest of creation. We are connected, as he mentioned several times throughout the document. By developing our God-given capacities, an ecological conversion can inspire us to greater creativity and enthusiasm in resolving the world's problems, developing what God has given us. That can lead to more creativity and to greater enthusiasm. Various convictions of our faith can help to enrich the meaning of this conversion. And these are things he mentioned right at the beginning of the encyclical. How each creature, for example, reflects God in some way. Every creature in some way reflects God. How Christ has taken unto himself the material world in the incarnation, taking on our human flesh and blood and so on. And now that he is risen, he is present to each creature with affection and light. In creating the world, God too wrote into it an order and a dynamism which we may not ignore. God had a plan and has a plan for the world, and we need to take account of that. The Pope then prays, and I'll finish with this: may the power and the light of grace we have received also be evident in our relationship to other creatures and to the world around us. In this way, we will help nurture that sublime fraternity with all creation, which St. Francis of Assisi so radiantly embodied. So we finish there for today, and as I say, next month hopefully we'll conclude with the rest of it.